Silence had been Amara Tillman's armor at Oakwood High, where the elite choir reigned supreme and students like her stayed invisible. She'd mastered the art of blending into backgrounds, her extraordinary voice locked away like a secret too precious to share. But when Madison Tate Golden Girl, with a sugar-sweet smile and venom in her veins, cornered Amara with a mocking challenge to audition, she didn't realize what she'd unleashed. The choir room fell deadly quiet that afternoon as Amara stood before the microphone, a thrift store dress against designer labels. The laughter died in their throats when the first note escaped hers, raw, powerful, undeniable. They thought they were witnessing the humiliation of an outsider. Instead, they were present for the birth of a legend. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The hallways of Oakwood High buzzed with morning activity as Amara Tillman slipped through the crowd, her oversized gray sweater almost swallowing her slender frame. Head down, she navigated the sea of students with practiced precision, like a small fish moving against the current. She hummed softly, so softly no one could hear a melody that lived only in her mind and in the safety of her empty home. Amara was invisible at Oakwood, and most days that was exactly how she wanted it. Being noticed meant being judged, and in a small southern town like Millfield, judgment came quick and stayed long. At 16, she'd mastered the art of blending into backgrounds, of making herself small enough to disappear into the cracks between social circles. Watch it. A shoulder bumped into hers, sending her backpack sliding down her arm. Madison Tate didn't even turn around, her blonde ponytail swinging as she continued laughing with her friends. The choir room door slammed behind them, the sound echoing down the hallway. Amara repositioned her backpack and paused outside the choir room. Through the small window in the door, she could see them, all the elite Oakwood choir. They moved with easy confidence, their voices carrying through the closed door. Madison stood at the center, her hands gesturing grandly as Ms. Wyndham nodded with approval. You planning on growing roots there, or you just appreciate fine architecture? Amara turned to find Carlos Diaz grinning at her, his dark hair falling over one eye. Unlike her, Carlos seemed to carry color wherever he went today. It was a bright blue sketchbook tucked under his arm and yellow headphones hanging around his neck. Just passing by, Amara mumbled, stepping away from the door. Same way. I'm just passing by the Broadway ticket booth every time I'm in New York. Carlos fell into step beside her. You know, you could just audition. Amara snorted softly. Right, and I could also just sprout wings and fly to the moon. Honestly, that might be easier than dealing with the choir mafia in there. Carlos nodded, toward the room they'd left behind. But seriously, Amara, you've got pipes. I've heard you humming. Humming isn't singing, she said quickly, too quickly. Fine, keep your secret superpower, Carlos said with a dramatic sigh. But one day, you're gonna let that voice out, and the whole town's gonna shake. Amara just shook her head, but something warm unfurled in her chest at his words. Carlos was the only one at school who bothered to look past her quiet exterior. He'd appointed himself her best friend freshman year when they were paired for art class, and his persistent kindness had eventually worn down her walls. The first bell rang, and they parted ways with a fist bump, Carlos heading to theater design, and Amara to a P English. As she settled into her seat in the back corner of the classroom, her phone buzzed with a text from her dad. Working double tonight? Lasagna and fridge. Don't wait up. Love you, kiddo, she typed back quickly. Love you too. Dad, be safe. James Tillman had been working double shifts at the factory and picking up weekend work at Rosie's Diner ever since Amara's mom passed away 3 years ago. The medical bills had nearly drowned them, and even now, they were just keeping their heads above water. Amara helped where she could, cleaning houses on weekends and babysitting for the neighbors, but her dad insisted her job was to focus on school. Education is your way forward, he'd say, his voice firm but gentle. Your mama would have wanted that. When she thought of her mother, Amara always heard music. Lynette Tillman had filled their small house with song while cooking, while cleaning, while braiding Amara's hair before bed. She'd never had formal training, but her voice had been rich and warm, like honey poured over velvet. The memory of her mother's voice followed Amara through the day, a comforting ghost that kept her company through classes and lunch period, where she sat with Carlos and his theater friends. She was picking at her sandwich when a commotion near the cafeteria entrance caught everyone's attention. Madison, Tate, and her choir friends were hanging posters, their excited voices carrying across the room. Carlos rolled his eyes. The annual "Look How Special We Are" announcement, he muttered, taking a bite of his apple. Curious despite herself, Amara watched as students gathered around the new posters. Through gaps in the crowd, she could make out bold lettering: Oakwood Choir Annual Auditions. Same circus, different year, Carlos said, but Amara barely heard him. Something tugged at her, a faint, persistent pull, like a melody waiting to be completed. After school, when the hallways had emptied, Amara found herself standing in front of one of the posters. The details jumped out at her. Auditions in 2 weeks, open to all students. Special emphasis on solo performances this year. At the bottom was Ms. Wyndham's signature, along with Madison Tate's as student choir president. Thinking of trying out, Amara startled, turning to find Ms. Wyndham watching her with curious eyes. The choir director was a tall woman with perfect posture and silver-streaked brown hair pulled into a tight bun. Her gaze was assessing, cool. "Oh no, I was just your Amara Tillman, aren't you?" Ms. Wyndham adjusted her glasses. "Junior year," Amara nodded, surprised to be recognized. "Well, auditions are open to everyone," Ms. Wyndham said, though something in her tone suggested everyone had limits. "The sign-up sheet is outside my office." She walked away before Amara could respond, her heels clicking rhythmically on the linoleum floor. That night, alone in the house, with her father working, Amara stood in front of the bathroom mirror. She rarely looked at herself, directly, a habit born from years of trying to be invisible. Now, she studied her reflection: dark brown skin, wide-set eyes, her mother's high cheekbones, and full lips. Her hair was pulled back in its usual tight ponytail, revealing the small music note earrings her father had given her on her 16th birthday. "Mom's favorite," he'd said, his voice thick with memory. Taking a deep breath, Amara opened her mouth and began to sing. Quietly at first, then with growing strength, she let out the melody that had been building inside her all day. It was a gospel song her mother used to sing, about rivers and mountains and coming home. Her voice filled the small bathroom, bouncing off the tiles. Rich and raw and untrained, but undeniably powerful. When she finished, the silence seemed to vibrate. Something had shifted, like the first crack in a dam. The next morning, Amara was at her locker when she heard them approaching, the distinctive sound of Madison's laugh, accompanied by her choir friends, Brittany Williams and Zoe Parker. Amara kept her head down, hoping they'd pass by, but Madison stopped directly behind her. "Hey Tillman," Madison said, her voice sugar-sweet and razor-sharp. "We saw you checking out the audition poster yesterday." Amara turned slowly, clutching her books to her chest like a shield. Madison smiled, didn't reach her eyes. "You should totally try out," Brittany chimed in, twirling a strand of blonde hair around her finger. "Yeah," Zoe added, her smile matching Madison's. "We need more ... diverse voices in the choir." Madison stepped closer, lowering her voice. "The solo competition winner gets a feature at regionals. College scouts attend those, you know. Could be your ticket out of wherever it is you live." The calculated cruelty in Madison's voice made it clear. This wasn't an invitation. It was a setup for a joke. Amara was meant to be the punchline. "I'm not interested," Amara said quietly, turning away. Come on," Madison pressed, placing a hand on Amara's shoulder. "Don't be shy. We're just trying to include you."
She said she's not interested. Carlos appeared beside Amara, his usually cheerful face hard with anger. Some people have actual talent to protect, not auto-tuned karaoke skills. Madison's eyes narrowed. "No one asked for your opinion, Set. Boy." She turned back to Amara with a plastic smile. "Think about it, Tillman. Auditions are next Friday. We'll save you a spot." The trio walked away, their laughter echoing down the hallway. "Ignore them," Carlos said, watching them go. "They're just threatened because Madison's spot isn't secure this year. There's a new vocal coach judging alongside Wyndham. Amara shrugged, trying to shake off the encounter. Doesn't matter. I wasn't planning to audition anyway. But that night, as she washed dishes after her father had gone to bed, Amara found herself singing again, louder this time, letting her voice fill their small kitchen. She didn't notice her father standing in the doorway until she turned to dry her hands. James Tillman was still in his factory uniform, exhaustion etched into the lines of his face, but his eyes shone with something Amara hadn't seen in a long time: hope. You sound just like her, he said softly. Amara froze, embarrassment washing over her. I didn't know you were home. Just got in. He moved to the refrigerator, pulling out leftovers. Your mother used to sing that same song when she was thinking through something. He sat at their small kitchen table, studying her. What's on your mind, kiddo? The words tumbled out before she could stop them. The choir additions, Madison's mockery, the secret desire that had been growing inside her. Mom always said I had a voice, she finished quietly. But what if everyone laughs? What if I'm not good enough? Her father was silent for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and handed it to her. I took this last Christmas. Never showed you because I didn't want to embarrass you. It was a video of Amara decorating their small tree, singing Silent Night, without realizing she was being recorded. Her voice was clear and strong, filling their living room with a hauntingly beautiful melody. That sound, her father said, pointing to the phone, doesn't come from someone who's not good enough. That comes from your soul, Amara, just like your mama. Tears pricked at Amara's eyes. I'm scared, Dad. Of course you are. Brave people get scared all the time. He squeezed her hand. But they do the thing anyway. The next day after school, when the hallways were nearly empty, Amara stood in front of the sign-up sheet outside Ms. Wyndham's office. Her hand trembled as she picked up the pen. After a moment's hesitation, she wrote, A. Tillman, in the last available slot. As she walked away, heart pounding. She didn't see Madison turn the corner, didn't see her stop at the sign-up sheet, didn't see the slow, cruel smile that spread across her face as she read Amara's name. The week leading up to auditions passed in a blur of anxiety and secret practice. Amara chose Amazing Grace, a song her mother had sung at church, a song that lived in her bones. She practiced in whispers at school, in full voice at home when her father was working, in her head during classes. Carlos, ecstatic when she told him, appointed himself her unofficial coach and cheerleader. You're going to blow them away, he insisted during lunch on Thursday. I know it. Amara picked at her food. I'm thinking of backing out. What? No way. Carlos leaned forward. What happened? Wordlessly, Amara pulled a folded paper from her pocket and handed it to him. She'd found it taped to her locker that morning. A crude drawing of a girl on a stage with tomatoes being thrown at her. Underneath, in block letters, stick to humming. Nobody. Carlos crumpled the paper, his face flushing with anger. Madison. Has to be. Doesn't matter who it was, Amara said. Quietly. They're right. I don't belong up there with the real singers. The real singers? Carlos made air quotes, his voice rising. You mean the auto-tune princesses who've had private lessons since they were 5? The ones who sound like every other pop clone on the radio? He shook his head fiercely. Your voice is real, Amara. Theirs are manufactured. Amara looked down, unconvinced. I should just know? Carlos cut her off. No backing out. I'll be right outside the door tomorrow. If you don't show up, I'm dragging you and myself. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She paced her small bedroom, alternating between practicing her song and talking herself out of showing up at all. Around midnight, she heard the front door open, her father returning from his late shift at the diner. She expected him to go straight to bed, but a few minutes later, there was a soft knock on her door. Still up, kiddo? James looked exhausted but smiled as he entered, holding a folded piece of paper. Found your sheet music on the kitchen table. He handed it to her. Inside, he'd written a note. You got this. Mom would have been proud. Amara's throat tightened. I'm scared I'll mess up. That they'll laugh. They might, her father said honestly. People can be cruel when they see something that shines brighter than they do. He sat on the edge of her bed. But that's their problem, not yours. What if Ms. Wyndham doesn't like my style? Everyone says she only picks certain types of voices. Then, Ms. Wyndham will miss out on something special. He stood, kissing the top of her head. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's a big day. Morning came too quickly. Amara dressed carefully in her best outfit, a simple blue dress her father had bought her for last year's school awards ceremony and the only pair of nice shoes she owned. The music note earrings completed the look, a small tribute to her mother, a small talisman for courage. The school day crawled by, each class an exercise in containing her mounting anxiety. By final period, Amara's stomach was in knots. When the bell rang, Carlos was waiting outside her classroom. "Ready?" he asked, though his face showed he already knew the answer. "No," Amara admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." They walked together to the auditorium, where a small crowd had already gathered. The choir program was Oakwood's pride there. Performances brought the community together. Their trophies filled display cases. Their seniors often received scholarships to prestigious music programs. Today's auditions, especially for the coveted solo spots, were practically a school event. Carlos squeezed her hand before she entered. "I'll be right outside. Break a leg." Inside, Amara found a seat in the back row. The auditorium was nearly full. Choir members, their friends, curious onlookers. Ms. Wyndham sat at a table in front of the stage with an older man Amara didn't recognize, presumably the visiting vocal coach. Madison and her friends were seated in the front row, occasionally turning to scan the crowd. When Madison spotted Amara, she nudged Brittany and whispered something that made them both laugh. Ms. Wyndham stood, calling for quiet. "Welcome to the annual Oakwood Choir auditions. We'll proceed alphabetically. Please come forward when your name is called." Amara's heart sank. Alphabetically meant she'd be near the end. More time to worry, more performances to compare herself to. She watched as student after student took the stage. Some were good, some were average, but all had a polished quality that spoke of training. And practiced. Madison's performance came midway through. She sang a technically perfect rendition of Hallelujah, her voice sweet and controlled. The audience applauded enthusiastically, and Ms. Wyndham made a note on her clipboard with a satisfied nod as the alphabet neared T. Amara's anxiety peaked. Her palms were sweating, her heart racing. Part of her still wanted to slip out the back door to pretend she'd never signed up at all. Then Ms. Wyndham called, "Hey, Tillman." A hush fell over the auditorium as Amara stood. She could feel eyes following her as she made her way to the stage, could hear the whispers and muffled laughs. "Amara." "Tillman." Ms. Wyndham's voice held surprise and something else, skepticism. "I wasn't aware you sang." I haven't. Before. In public." Amara's voice was barely audible. From the front row, Madison called out with exaggerated cheer, "You can do it, Amara. We're all rooting for you." Scattered laughter followed, and Amara felt her cheeks burn. She glanced toward the exit, half expecting to see Carlos, but the door remained closed. She was alone on the stage, under the harsh lights, with dozens of eyes watching, waiting for her to fail. Ms. Wyndham sighed. "What will you be singing for us today?" "Amazing Grace," Amara replied, her voice steadier than she felt. The accompanying pianist began to play, and Amara closed her eyes. For a moment, the world fell away, the audience, the judging eyes, the weight of expectation. In that darkness, she found her mother's face, heard her voice, "Sing from your soul, baby girl." Amara took a deep breath and began. The first note wavered slightly, then strengthened. By the second line, something shifted in the auditorium. The muffled giggles stopped. Phones lowered. Heads lifted. Amara's voice filled the space, raw and powerful, unpolished but undeniable. She didn't mimic the studio-perfect sounds of her classmates. She sang from somewhere deeper, somewhere real. Each note carried the weight of memory, of loss, of hope. Emotions too big for her small frame, spilling out into the silent room. When she finished, there was no sound. No applause, no whispers. Just silence, heavy and complete. Amara opened her eyes. The auditorium was still, faces frozen in expressions ranging from shock to disbelief. Madison sat rigid in her seat, mouth slightly open. Ms. Wyndham's pen had stopped moving across her clipboard. Then, from the back of the room, a single person began to clap. Others joined slowly, scattered applause building to a hesitant crescendo. Ms. Wyndham cleared her throat. "Thank you, Miss Tillman. That was unexpected." Her voice was neutral, her face unreadable. "You may go." Amara walked off stage on shaky legs, relief and adrenaline making her lightheaded. In the hallway, Carlos waited, his face split into a wide grin. "I heard you through the door," he said, grabbing her shoulders. "You were amazing. Did you see their faces?" Before Amara could answer, the auditorium doors opened, and students began filing out. They stared as they passed, some whispering behind their hands, others glancing away when she met their eyes. No one spoke to her directly. Madison emerged surrounded by her friends, her face tight with anger. When she spotted Amara, she marched over, Brittany and Zoe flanking her like bodyguards. "Cute stunt," Madison said, her voice cold. "Who recorded that for you? Must have been a pretty good speaker system to make it sound like it was actually coming from you." Amara blinked, confused. "What? Oh, please." Madison rolled her eyes. "Everyone knows you can't actually sing like that. The audio obviously glitched or something." "There was no glitch," Carlos said, stepping forward. "That was all, Amara." Madison's laugh was sharp. "Right? And I'm secretly Beyoncé." She turned to Amara, her smile venomous. "Enjoy your little moment of fame, Tillman. It won't last." As they walked away, Amara could hear them already spinning the narrative. It was a technical fluke. Someone played a recording. She got lucky. It won't happen again. "Ignore them," Carlos said, watching them go. "They're just scared because you're better than all of them combined." But by the next morning, the rumors had spread throughout the school. As Amara walked to her locker, she could feel the stares, could hear the whispers following her. Some were curious, some dismissive, some outright hostile. The story had morphed overnight. Amara had cheated somehow. She'd used some trick. It couldn't have been real. Even Ms. Wyndham seemed to have bought into the doubt. When the finalist list was posted outside the choir room, Amara's name was conspicuously absent. Madison's name was at the top, followed by 4 other regular choir members. "This is bull," Carlos fumed, staring at the list during lunch period. "You were better than at least 3 of these people." Amara picked at her food, trying to ignore the hollow feeling in her chest. "It doesn't matter." "Like hell it doesn't." Carlos pulled out his phone. "I'm going to fix this." "What are you doing?" "Getting proof." He tapped rapidly on his screen. "I recorded your audition through the door crack. Audio only, but it's clear as day that it's you singing." Amara's eyes widened. "Carlos, don't." But he was already showing her the anonymous account he'd created, the clip uploaded with the caption, "Unknown talent at Oakwood High." "Who is she?" The video already had dozens of comments. "It's going viral," Carlos said, grinning. "People are asking who you are." "I don't want people asking who I am," Amara protested. But a small part of her, the part that had stood on that stage and finally let her voice be heard, felt a flutter of validation. That afternoon, as Amara was leaving school, Ms. Wyndham intercepted her in the hallway. "Miss Tillman, a word." The choir director's face was tight with what looked like forced politeness. "There seems to have been some inconsistency in our judging process." Amara waited, saying nothing. "We've decided to hold a second round of auditions for all potential soloists." Ms. Wyndham's smile didn't reach her eyes. "To ensure fairness and account for any technical variables that might have affected the initial performances." Translation: they wanted to prove Amara's audition was a fluke. "The re-auditions will be next Tuesday," Ms. Wyndham continued. "I do hope you'll participate." As the choir director walked away, Amara felt something shift inside her, a quiet determination replacing the doubt that had plagued her for so long. Maybe they didn't believe in her yet. Maybe they never would. But for the first time, Amara believed in herself. And that, she was beginning to understand, was the only thing that really mattered. The morning of the finalist rehearsal dawned bright and clear, but Amara's stomach was in knots as she approached the choir room. Her inclusion in the final round had caused whispers throughout the school, some supportive, others skeptical, and a few outright hostile. The viral recording Carlos had posted had gained thousands of views overnight, with comments ranging from "Who is this girl?" to "better than half the artists on the radio." Amara paused outside the door, adjusting the music note earrings that had become her talisman. She could hear voices inside, Madison's distinctive laugh cutting through the general chatter. Taking a deep breath, she pushed the door open. The room fell silent as she entered. 5 pairs of eyes turned to stare: Madison, Brittany, Zoe, and 2 other choir regulars. Jason Wright, and Emma Davis. Ms. Wyndham stood at the piano, her expression carefully neutral. "Ah, Miss Tillman. How kind of you to join us." Ms. Wyndham's voice held a hint of ice. "We've already begun warm-ups." Madison smirked, whispering something to Brittany that made her snicker behind her hand. Amara took a seat in the corner, feeling like an intruder in a private club. "As I was saying," Ms. Wyndham continued, "the finalist rehearsal schedule will be posted by this afternoon. Each of you will have individual sessions with me, as well as time with the school band to prepare your arrangements." She handed out sheet music, pausing when she reached Amara. "I've taken the liberty of adjusting your arrangement, Miss Tillman." The original was a bit unstructured for competition standards. Amara looked down at the music. Her soulful interpretation of Amazing Grace had been stripped down, reformatted into something technically precise but emotionally flat. Ms. Wyndham, I was hoping to keep some of the gospel elements. This arrangement has won regional competitions 3 years running." Ms. Wyndham cut her off. "I suggest you follow it exactly." The rest of the rehearsal was equally tense. When it came time for individual practice, Ms. Wyndham gave Madison a prime afternoon slot and extensive feedback. Jason and Emma received decent morning times with constructive criticism. Brittany and Zoe, though clearly not as talented, were treated with patient encouragement. Amara was assigned the last slot of the day, 7:30 p.m., when most students and faculty would be long gone. "You'll need the extra practice time," Ms. Wyndham said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Your technique needs refinement." As they filed out of the room, Madison deliberately stepped in front of Amara, causing her to stumble. "Oops," Madison said sweetly. "Didn't see you there." She lowered her voice. "Just like no one will see you at regionals. This is my spotlight, Tillman. Remember that." Amara said nothing, but her hands trembled slightly as she gathered her things outside in the hallway. Carlos was waiting, his face brightening when he saw her. "How'd it go?" "About as well as you'd expect," Amara replied, showing him her revised sheet music. She gutted it. Carlos scanned the music, his expression darkening. "This is bull. She's trying to make you sound like everyone else." "Maybe that's what wins competitions," Amara sighed, tucking the music into her backpack. "No, what wins competitions is a voice that makes people feel something." Carlos's eyes narrowed suddenly, focusing on something behind her. "Hold up. Isn't that Nadine Parker?" Amara turned to see a quiet, strawberry blonde girl from the choir walking quickly down the hallway, glancing over her shoulder as if worried about being followed. Nadine had always seemed different from Madison's crowd, less mean, more reserved. "She's one of the altos," Amara confirmed. "Why?" "I've heard things." Carlos watched Nadine disappear around a corner. "She and Madison had some kind of falling out last year. Might be worth talking to her." "And say what?" "Hey, help me take down your choir leader." Amara shook her head. "I just need to focus on the music." But focusing proved difficult over the next week of rehearsals. Ms. Wyndham's criticism was relentless. Amara's timing was off. Her vowels were too open. Her delivery was too aggressive. "This isn't a gospel choir, Miss Tillman," Ms. Wyndham said during a particularly grueling session. "We're aiming for precision, not emotion." The comment stung, but not as much as watching Ms. Wyndham praise Madison for emoting beautifully moments later. The double standard was becoming increasingly obvious. Meanwhile, Carlos had been doing some investigating of his own. During lunch on Thursday, he slid into the seat across from Amara, his eyes bright with discovery. "So get this," he said, keeping his voice low. "My cousin works at the admin office over at Westlake Conservatory. She says Ms. Wyndham has been gunning for a teaching position there for years." Amara looked up from her sandwich. "What does that have to do with anything?" "Everything. The director at Westlake is on the judging panel for regionals this year. And guess whose daddy is on the Westlake board?" Carlos raised his eyebrows meaningfully. "Madison's." Amara guessed, her heart sinking. "Bingo." Carlos leaned forward. "Wyndham needs Madison to win the Regional Soloist Award. It's her ticket to that teaching job." Amara pushed her lunch away, her appetite gone. "So I never had a chance." "No, that's just it. You do have a chance. A real one." Carlos's eyes were intense. "Why do you think they're working so hard to sabotage you?" "They're scared, Amara. Your voice threatens their whole plan." That night, Amara skipped dinner, shutting herself in her room with her headphones. The weight of everything, the rehearsals, the whispers, the deliberate sabotage, felt crushing. For the first time since her audition, doubt crept back in. Maybe she should just withdraw, let Madison have her spotlight, and Ms. Wyndham have her job. What was the point of fighting a system that was rigged against her from the start? She was still lying on her bed, staring at the ceiling, when her father knocked gently on the door. "Not hungry?" James Tillman asked, concern etched on his tired face. Amara shook her head. "Lost my appetite." Her father sat on the edge of the bed, studying her. "Want to talk about it?" The whole story spilled out. Ms. Wyndham's bias, Madison's sabotage, the conservatory connection. When she finished, her father was quiet for a long moment. "Sounds like they're not playing fair," he finally said. "They're not," Amara agreed miserably. "And I don't know how to fight it." Her father reached for the old shoebox he kept on the top shelf of his closet, the one filled with mementos of her mother. From it, he pulled a DVD labeled Family Videos, 2010. "I want to show you something." Downstairs, he put the disc into their ancient DVD player. The screen flickered to life, showing a much younger Amara, maybe 5 or 6, sitting on her mother's lap. Lynette Tillman was singing softly, rocking back and forth, while little Amara hummed along. "You've got music in your soul, baby girl," her mother whispered on the recording. "Don't ever let anyone tell you different." Tears pricked at Amara's eyes. The grief of losing her mother still hit in unexpected waves, even 3 years later. Her father squeezed her shoulder gently. "Your mama didn't get to shine the way she should have," he said quietly. "Don't let them dim your light, too." The next day at school, Amara was at her locker when Carlos came running up, out of breath and excited. "You're not going to believe this," he gasped. "I know someone who can help you." "Help me how?" Amara asked, closing her locker. "With your voice. With everything." Carlos grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the exit. "Come on, we have a free period. She's waiting at the coffee shop across the street." "Who's waiting?" "Carlos, what did you do?" "But." Carlos just grinned, dragging her along. The coffee shop was nearly empty when they arrived. In the back corner sat a woman Amara vaguely recognized, tall and elegant, with silver-streaked black hair pulled into a loose bun. As they approached, the woman looked up and smiled. "Amara Tillman," she said, her voice warm and rich. "I've been looking forward to meeting you." Carlos made the introductions. "Amara, this is Diana Jackson. She's a vocal coach at First Baptist, and she used to sing with the Atlanta Symphony. She's also my aunt's best friend." Diana Jackson's handshake was firm. "Carlos, show me your video. You have a remarkable gift." Amara felt her cheeks warm. "It's not professionally trained or anything. That's what makes it special," Diana interrupted. "You sing from somewhere real." "But," she added with a smile, "technique can help your real voice shine even brighter." Over the next hour, Diana listened to Amara sing, offering gentle corrections to her breathing, her posture, her control. Unlike Ms. Wyndham's harsh criticism, Diana's guidance felt supportive, aimed at enhancing Amara's natural style rather than erasing it. "The trick," Diana explained, "is to master the rules so you know exactly how and when to break them. Your gospel inflections are beautiful, but they'll be even more powerful with proper breath support." As they were leaving, Diana handed Amara her card. "I have time on Saturday mornings and Tuesday evenings. No charge. Just promise me you'll sing your truth, not what they want to hear." For the next 2 weeks, Amara lived a double life, following Ms. Wyndham's rigid instruction during official rehearsals, then working with Diana to develop her own style in secret sessions. She balanced these lessons with school, homework, and weekend cleaning shifts at her dad's diner to help with bills. The work was exhausting but transformative. Under Diana's guidance, Amara's voice grew stronger, more controlled, but no less authentic. She learned to channel her emotions precisely, to use dynamics and phrasing to tell a story, to command a stage with her presence alone. "Your voice is a weapon and a healing balm all at once," Diana told her during their final session before the competition. "Use it wisely." 3 days before the final audition, Amara was practicing in an empty classroom when the door opened. She turned, expecting Carlos or perhaps a teacher, but instead found Nadine Parker watching her with nervous eyes. "Sorry," Nadine said quickly. "I heard you singing. You're really good." "Thanks." Amara replied cautiously, remembering that Nadine was still part of the choir crowd. Nadine glanced over her shoulder, then stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. Look, I need to tell you something. About Madison and Ms. Wyndham. Amara waited, saying nothing. They're planning something for your final audition. Nadine twisted her hands together. Madison's going to switch your sheet music right before you go on. They've rewritten it in a key that's too high for most people to hit without preparation. Amara's stomach dropped. Why are you telling me this? Nadine's eyes flashed with unexpected anger. Because it's wrong. And because Madison did the same thing to me last year when I was up for section leader. She took a deep breath. She's been doing this for years, and Ms. Wyndham lets her because Madison's dad donates to the program. Why doesn't anyone speak up? People have tried. They get shut down. Or worse. Nadine shrugged sadly. But you're different. You have something she can't touch, no matter how hard she tries. After Nadine left, Amara immediately texted Carlos about the warning. His response was swift. I'll be watching the music table like a hawk. No worries. True to his word. The day before the final audition, Carlos stationed himself near the table where performers' sheet music was arranged. Sure enough, during a break when the room was nearly empty, Madison approached with papers in hand. Carlos intercepted her smoothly, pretending to bump into her while spilling his water bottle. Oops, so clumsy of me, he said loudly as Madison's pristine white top was splashed. As she shrieked and rushed to the bathroom, Carlos quickly checked the altered music she'd been about to switch and replaced it with Amara's correct version. The night before the final audition, Amara sat cross-legged on her bed, turning her mother's charm bracelet over in her hands. Her father had given it to her that morning, a simple silver chain with a music note charm that had belonged to her mother. For luck, he'd said, fastening it around her wrist. Luck, Amara thought, might not be enough against a system designed to keep her out. But as she stared at the small silver note catching the lamplight, she realized something important. She didn't need to win their approval. She just needed to sing her truth. With that thought, she finally fell asleep, the bracelet still on her wrist, gleaming in the darkness like a promise. The day of the final audition arrived with a buzz of anticipation throughout Oakwood High. Word had spread that this year's competition was unusually fierce, with rumors of that girl from the viral video challenging Madison Tate's 3-year reign as lead soloist. The auditorium was packed by the time Amara arrived, not just with students, but parents, faculty, and even a local blogger who ran a music column for the town paper. Carlos met her at the entrance, giving her a thumbs up. Standing room only, he whispered. Half the town wants to see what all the fuss is about. Amara nodded, her throat suddenly dry. She wore a simple navy dress, the nicest one she owned, with her mother's bracelet and music note earrings. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, Diana's voice in her head reminding her to keep her posture straight, her breathing deep. Backstage was chaos. Performers warming up, stage crew adjusting lights, Ms. Wyndham barking orders. Madison stood in the center of it all, resplendent in an expensive white dress, her blonde hair falling in perfect waves down her back. When she spotted Amara, she broke away from her friends and sauntered over. Don't choke this time, Church. Mouse, she said, her voice sweet with venom. Everyone's waiting to see if you've got anything left in those pipes. To her own surprise, Amara felt calm in the face of Madison's attempt at intimidation. She simply smiled slightly, touching her mother's bracelet for reassurance. Break a leg, Madison, she replied quietly, then turned away. Madison's confusion at not getting a reaction was almost worth the weeks of torment. The audition order was announced. Madison would perform first, followed by the other 3 finalists, with Amara closing the show. As Madison took the stage to enthusiastic applause, Amara found a quiet corner to focus her thoughts. Madison's performance was exactly as expected, technically flawless, precisely as written, with all the right dynamic markings in all the right places. Her high notes were crystal clear, her runs perfectly executed. The audience responded with polite, appreciative applause. Ms. Wyndham beamed from the judges' table. One by one, the other finalists performed. Jason's tenor was strong, but somewhat one-dimensional. Emma's soprano was pretty, but unremarkable. Brittany, clearly there more for her connection to Madison than her talent, struggled with the higher passages. Then, finally, It was Amara's turn. As she walked onto the stage, the auditorium fell silent. She could feel the weight of expectation, of curiosity, of skepticism. At the judges' table, Ms. Wyndham watched with a tight expression, pen poised over her scoring sheet. Amara adjusted the microphone, her mother's bracelet catching the light. She closed her eyes for a moment, centering herself in the silence. Then, with a small nod to the pianist, she began. The opening notes of Amazing Grace filled the auditorium. But this wasn't the stripped-down, technical version Ms. Wyndham had insisted upon. This was Amara's own arrangement, a spiritual blues-inspired interpretation that started soft and intimate, then built to something raw and powerful. She sang from her soul, letting all the emotion of the past weeks pour through her voice. The doubt, the struggle, the resilience, the hope. Each phrase told a story, each note carried meaning. This wasn't just a performance. It was a declaration. When she reached the final verse, her voice soared to the high note, the one Ms. Wyndham had warned might be too ambitious. It wavered slightly with emotion, but didn't break. That tiny imperfection only made it more human, more real, more hers. As the final note faded, there was a moment of absolute silence. Then, like a wave breaking, the audience erupted. People stood, applauding wildly, some wiping away tears. Carlos was on his feet, whistling and cheering. Even some of the choir students were standing, looking stunned but genuinely moved. Ms. Wyndham sat rigid in her chair, her face unreadable. Beside her, the other judges were on their feet, applauding with the rest of the crowd. Amara walked off stage in a daze, her heart pounding. In the wings, several students approached her with genuine congratulations. Nadine gave her a subtle thumbs up as she passed. Before she could find Carlos, a tall man with a press badge stepped into her path. Amara Tillman? I'm Jeff Taylor from the Millfield Music blog. He held up his phone, clearly recording. That was an incredible performance. Would you mind answering a few questions? Amara froze, unprepared for this attention. Just a quick interview, Jeff pressed. Your interpretation was unlike anything I've heard at the high school level. Where did that arrangement come from? Carlos appeared at her side, pulling out his own phone to record the exchange. His presence gave her courage. It came from my mother, Amara said, finding her voice. And from my experiences. I just sang how I feel. And how do you feel about challenging the traditional Oakwood choir sound? Amara considered her answer carefully. I don't see it as a challenge. Music is about expression, not just precision. I'm grateful for the technique I've learned, but at the end of the day, a song has to mean something. Jeff nodded, clearly impressed by her poise. One last question. What would winning the soloist position mean to you? Honestly, Amara smiled slightly. It would mean that being different isn't always a disadvantage. That's sometimes your own voice is exactly what people need to hear. As Jeff thanked her and moved away, Carlos grinned widely. That was perfect. I'm posting this right now. What? No, Carlos. But he was already tapping on his phone. Too late. The people need to hear from the voice of the year. The next 24 hours passed in a blur. Carlos's recording of the interview, along with a shaky but clear video of her performance, exploded online. Comments poured in from around the state, then beyond. Voice of the year. From overlooked to unstoppable. Someone signed this girl already. Local radio stations picked up the story. The Millfield Music blog's feature on her, Oakwood's hidden gem, was shared thousands of times. People Amara had never met were stopping her in the hallways to congratulate her. Through it all, there was no official word from Ms. Wyndham about the results. The announcement was scheduled for the morning after the audition, but the choir room board remained empty all day. She's stalling, Carlos said as they sat in the cafeteria, Amara trying to ignore the stares and whispers around them, trying to figure out how to give it to Madison without causing a riot. Maybe she already has, Amara replied, picking at her lunch. Maybe we just missed the announcement. But as they left the cafeteria, Nadine hurried up to them, her expression urgent. Check the choir room, she said quickly. They just posted it. A small crowd had already gathered by the time they reached the choir board. Students parted as Amara approached, some giving her encouraging smiles, others watching with curiosity. There, at the top of the list for Spring Showcase lead soloist, was a single name, Amara Tillman. Amara stared at her name, not quite believing it. Carlos let out a whoop, throwing his arm around her shoulders. They couldn't deny you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Not after that performance. From the corner of her eye, Amara saw Ms. Wyndham watching from her office door, her expression a mix of resignation and irritation. Their eyes met, briefly before the choir director turned away, disappearing into her office. In the parking lot after school, Madison's reaction was less restrained. Surrounded by her diminished circle of friends, she threw a spectacular tantrum, her face red with fury. "This is ridiculous," she shouted, loud enough for half the school to hear. "My father donates thousands to this program. That scholarship was supposed to be mine." Carlos, never one to miss an opportunity, discreetly recorded the meltdown from a distance. That evening, as Amara walked home with Carlos, her phone rang with a number she didn't recognize. She answered hesitantly, still unused to the attention. "Is this Amara Tillman?" a warm, professional voice asked. "This is Renee Washington from the National Youth Vocalist Competition. We saw your performance video online and would like to formally invite you to audition for our showcase in June." Amara stopped walking, her free hand flying to her mouth. Carlos watched her with wide eyes, mouthing "what?" as she listened. "The competition is in Atlanta," Renee continued. "All expenses would be covered for you and a guardian. We've been particularly impressed with your authentic style and emotional delivery." When the call ended, Amara stood frozen on the sidewalk, the spring sunlight warm on her face. Carlos was practically bouncing with anticipation. "Well," he demanded, "what was that about?" "The National Youth Vocalist Competition," Amara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They want me to audition. In Atlanta." Carlos's scream of excitement echoed down the quiet street. He grabbed her in a hug, spinning her around. I told you your voice would change everything." As they continued walking, Amara's phone buzzed with a text from her father. "Got a call from the school. So proud of you, kiddo. Your mama's watching. I know it." Amara smiled, touching the charm bracelet on her wrist. From invisible to unstoppable in just a few weeks. It didn't seem real. "What happens now?" she asked, half to herself, half to Carlos. "Now," Carlos grinned. "Now you keep singing, one note at a time, and the whole world starts listening." Monday morning arrived with a strange new reality for Amara. As she walked through Oakwood High's main entrance, heads turned and conversations paused. Some students offered congratulatory smiles, others watched with curious eyes. A few of Madison's loyal supporters glared openly, but their hostility felt less intimidating now. Carlos met her at her locker, practically vibrating with excitement. "You're trending on 3 different platforms," he announced, holding up his phone. "The video hit 50,000 views overnight. You're officially famous." "I'm not famous," Amara protested, though a small thrill ran through her at the thought of so many people hearing her voice. "It's just local stuff. Local today, national tomorrow," Carlos insisted. "Trust me, this is just the beginning." The first choir rehearsal as lead soloist was scheduled for after school. Amara approached the music room with equal parts excitement and dread. When she pushed open the door, the usual chatter died immediately. 30 pairs of eyes turned to stare as she entered Dunamass. Wyndham stood at the piano, her smile tight and professional. "Ah, Miss Tillman. So glad you could join us." Her tone suggested Amara was late, though she was precisely on time. "Please, take your place at the front." The front was a small area directly before the risers where the soloist traditionally stood. For 3 years, it had been Madison's territory. Now, as Amara walked toward it, she felt the weight of the transition. "As you all know," Ms. Wyndham continued, addressing the choir, "Amara will be our lead soloist for the spring showcase and regional competition. I expect everyone to adjust accordingly." The rehearsal that followed was tense. Ms. Wyndham offered Amara minimal guidance, frequently cutting her off mid-phrase with curt corrections. "Less vibrato. Stay on the written notes. This isn't a gospel performance, Miss Tillman." When Amara tried to explain her interpretation, Ms. Wyndham shut her down. "You're the soloist, not the director. Don't let it go to your head." By the end of rehearsal, Amara's initial excitement had dimmed considerably. As students filed out, she overheard snippets of conversation. "Just a fluke. Won't last past regionals. Sympathy votes because of her backstory." Nadine caught up with her in the hallway. Don't listen to them, she said quietly. They're just repeating what Madison tells them. You were amazing, and they know it. Thanks, Amara replied, genuinely grateful for the support. I just didn't expect it to be so political. Nadine finished with a knowing smile. Welcome to Oakwood Choir. It's always been this way. Meanwhile, Carlos had thrown himself enthusiastically into his newest project. As part of the theater tech crew, he'd volunteered to design the set for the spring showcase. His vision was ambitious, a minimalist stage with dynamic lighting that would shift with the emotional beats of the music. It'll be simple but powerful, he explained to Amara as they walked home. Like your voice. No clutter, just pure feeling. Ms. Wyndham might not go for that, Amara warned. She seems to prefer the traditional approach. Carlos grinned. Too late. Mr. Peterson already approved it. Mr. Peterson was the theater director who oversaw all stage productions. And he outranks Wyndham when it comes to production design. For the next week, Amara settled into her new role, growing more comfortable despite Ms. Wyndham's cold treatment. The other choir members gradually warmed to her, especially after she helped several of them with difficult passages during sectional practice. But as her star rose at school, shadows began to gather elsewhere. On Thursday evening, Amara arrived at Rosie's diner where her father worked the late shift, bringing him dinner as she sometimes did. She found him in the back office with the manager, his expression troubled. Everything okay, Dad? She asked. Setting down the bag of food, James forced a smile. Everything's fine, kiddo. Just some business stuff. Later that night, Amara found a crumpled paper in the trash, a crude note that read, Your daughter thinks she's better than us. Tell her to stay in her lane. The next day at school, Amara confronted Carlos. Did you know people are leaving? Nasty notes at my dad's work. Carlos looked genuinely shocked. What? No, that's crossing a line. It has to be Madison, Amara said, her voice tight with anger. She's trying to get at me through my dad. We don't have proof, Carlos cautioned, though his expression darkened. But I wouldn't put it past her. That afternoon, as Amara was leaving rehearsal, Ms. Wyndham called her aside. I've received some feedback about your feature in that music blog, she said, her tone disapproving. What kind of feedback? Amara asked, though she could guess .ms. Wyndham's smile was thin. Several parents feel the article portrays our program in an unfair light. It suggests our selection process was somehow biased before you came along. I didn't say anything like that in the interview, Amara protested. Nevertheless, I'd appreciate if you'd refrain from further media exposure without school approval. Ms. Wyndham gathered her papers. This is a prestigious program with standards to maintain, not a platform for personal publicity. The accusation stung, especially since Amara had never sought the attention. She walked home alone that day, her thoughts churning. As she rounded the corner to her street, she spotted an unfamiliar car in their driveway, a sleek black sedan that looked jarringly out of place in their modest neighborhood. Inside, she found her father sitting at the kitchen table with a woman Amara hadn't seen in years. Tall and elegant, with the same high cheekbones as her mother but harder eyes, Vivian Reed was Lynette Tillman's estranged sister. Amara, Vivian stood, arms outstretched for a hug that felt performative. Look at you, all grown up and famous. Aunt Vivian, Amara responded, accepting the brief embrace with confusion. What are you doing here? I saw your video online, Vivian explained, her Atlanta accent more pronounced than Amara remembered. I couldn't believe my eyes. My niece, the viral sensation. I just had to come see you. The visit was awkward. Vivian peppered Amara with questions about her singing, the competition, her plans for the future. She barely mentioned Lynette, and when James brought up how proud his late wife would have been, Vivian smoothly changed the subject. You know, I have connections in the music industry, she said over dinner. People who could really help launch your career. I'm just focusing on school right now, Amara replied carefully. And the regional competition. Of course, Vivian nodded. But after that, well, you'll need proper management. Someone who understands the business. She glanced around their small living room with barely concealed judgment. Someone who can open doors. After Vivian left, promising to return soon, Amara found her father sitting on the porch steps, staring into the darkness. She didn't even come to Mom's funeral, Amara said quietly, Sitting beside him, James sighed. Your aunt and your mother had complicated history. Vivian always thought Lynette was wasting her talent, staying in this small town, marrying a factory worker. He gave Amara a sad smile. They stopped speaking when your mom got sick. Vivian thought she should be focusing on her career instead of starting a family. And now she shows up when I'm getting attention? Amara's voice held a rare edge of anger. People are complicated, kiddo. Maybe she regrets the lost years. He put his arm around her shoulders. Or maybe she just wants to be associated with the next big star. The next day at school, Carlos was waiting with news of his own. Wyndham's trying to get me removed from the showcase design, he said, his face flushed with anger. She told Peterson my concepts are too distracting and inappropriate for a classical performance. Can she do that? Amara asked. She's trying. Says she wants to bring in a certified designer from the community college. Carlos clenched his fists. It's because I'm your friend. She's punishing both of us. Amara's anger crystallized into determination. Not this time. She marched directly to Mr. Peterson's office, where she found him in conversation with Ms. Wyndham. They both looked up in surprise as she entered without knocking. Miss Tillman, Ms. Wyndham began, we're in a private. Carlos stays as designer. Amara said firmly, surprising herself with her boldness. His work is innovative and perfect for the showcase. If he goes, so do I. A tense silence followed. Mr. Peterson looked between them, eyebrows raised. That would be a shame, he finally said, especially since your performance is already generating interest in the showcase. He turned to Ms. Wyndham. I think we should keep the original team intact, don't you? Ms. Wyndham's smile could have frozen water. Of course, if our soloist insists. That evening, after a particularly grueling rehearsal where Ms. Wyndham had pushed Amara harder than ever, she and Carlos stayed behind in the empty auditorium. Carlos worked on lighting configurations while Amara practiced, her voice echoing in the cavernous space. As the night deepened, Amara switched from the competition piece to a lullaby her mother used to sing, a simple, haunting melody about starlight and dreams. Carlos sat on the edge of the stage, watching her with quiet admiration. That was beautiful, he said when she finished. What is it? Something my mom wrote. Amara replied, sitting beside him. She used to sing it to me every night. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the empty auditorium feeling like a sanctuary. We're not quitting, are we? Carlos asked finally. No matter what they throw at us. Amara touched her mother's bracelet, the small silver charm catching the stage light. Not now, she agreed. Not ever. The regional showcase arrived, with all the anticipation of a storm breaking. For weeks, Oakwood High had buzzed with preparations, posters lining the hallways, announcements over the PA system, even a feature in the local newspaper about the renaissance of the storied choir program. The morning of the event, Amara woke. Before dawn, too nervous to sleep. She stood at her window, watching the sky lighten from black to deep blue to the pale gold of early morning. Today, everything would change. She could feel it in her bones. The showcase was being held at the County Performing Arts Center, a venue 3 times the size of Oakwood's auditorium. Students from top schools across the state would be competing, with judges from prestigious music programs in attendance. The prize was more than just a trophy. It was opportunity, recognition, a possible pathway to scholarship. When Amara arrived with her father, the parking lot was already filled with buses from other schools, parents' cars, and even a few news vans from local stations. The buzz of excitement was palpable. You ready for this, kiddo? James asked, squeezing her hand. Amara nodded, though her heart hammered in her chest. Ready as I'll ever be. Inside, the backstage area was controlled chaos, students warming up, directors giving last-minute instructions, stage crew adjusting equipment. Carlos found her immediately, pulling her into a quick hug. The stage looks amazing, he said proudly. And guess who's sitting third row center? A rep from Juilliard. Amara's eyes widened. Seriously? Seriously. Also, brace yourself. Madison's here. What? How? Madison had been conspicuously absent from school since her parking lot meltdown, rumored to have transferred to a private academy. Carlos gestured toward a group of students in unfamiliar uniforms. Westridge Academy. Daddy must have pulled some strings to get her enrolled mid-semester. She's competing against us now. Before Amara could process this information, Ms. Wyndham appeared, her face tense with nervous energy. "There you are, Miss Tillman. We need to discuss your arrangement." She pulled Amara aside, lowering her voice. "I've made some final adjustments to better showcase the full choir. Your sole improvisation in the third verse has been removed." Amara stared at her in disbelief. "That's the heart of the piece. We've been rehearsing it that way for weeks. And now we're adjusting." Ms. Wyndham's tone left no room for discussion. "Lose the sole arrangement. Stick to the sheet, or you're off the program. This is a prestigious competition, not an open mic night." For a moment, Amara considered complying. The easier path would be to bend, to do as she was told, to not make waves. But something inside her, the same something that had pushed her to audition in the first place, rebelled. "I'm singing it my way," she said quietly. "The way that moved everyone at the audition. The way that got me this position." Ms. Wyndham's eyes narrowed. "This is not a negotiation." "You're right, it's not." Amara met her gaze steadily. "Either I sing my arrangement, or you find another soloist in the next 30 minutes. It was a gamble. Ms. Wyndham could easily call her bluff. But something in Amara's expression must have convinced her that it wasn't a bluff at all. "Fine," the choir director said tightly. "But when this backfires, remember it was your choice." As Ms. Wyndham stalked away, Carlos appeared at Amara's side. "What was that about?" "Just setting some boundaries," Amara replied, her heart still racing from the confrontation. Meanwhile, across the backstage area, Madison was holding court with her new choir, occasionally shooting venomous glances in Amara's direction. She looked different in her Westridge uniform, more polished, more privileged, but somehow smaller, too, as if separated from her usual territory. The showcase began with the smaller ensembles performing. Oakwood's chamber choir, without Amara, delivered a solid, if uninspiring rendition of a classical piece. Other schools followed, some impressive, others merely competent. Carlos, who had been splitting his time between checking on Amara and overseeing his stage design, suddenly rushed up to her with urgency in his eyes. "You need to see something," he whispered, pulling her toward a secluded corner where Nadine was waiting, looking nervous. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you," Nadine began, but it didn't feel right to stay quiet. She held up her phone, showing a video she'd recorded. "I caught this just before the showcase started." The video showed Madison and Ms. Wyndham in close conversation, their voices low but clear enough. "Just need to make sure her mic levels are lower than the choir's," Madison was saying. "And dim her spotlight during the solo. Nothing obvious, just enough to minimize the impact." "I've already spoken to the sound tech," Ms. Wyndham replied. "As for the lighting, I can't promise anything with that Carlos boy running things." "My father spoke with the head judge this morning," Madison continued. "Reminded him how generous the Tate Foundation has been to the Arts Council." Amara watched in stunned silence as the video ended. "They're still trying to sabotage me. Even now, what do you want to do?" Carlos asked. "We could show this to the officials, get them disqualified." Amara thought for a moment, then shook her head. "No, I don't want to win that way." A plan was forming in her mind. "Nadine, can you find out exactly what they told the sound tech?" "Already did," Nadine replied with a small smile. "They want your mic at half volume during your solo section." "Perfect." Amara turned to Carlos. "And the lighting?" "They can try," he scoffed. "But I'm running the board myself. No one touches my design." As the time for Oakwood's main performance approached, Amara made a quick decision. She found the sound technician, a college student who looked bored with the whole proceedings. "There's been a change of plan," she said confidently. "For the Oakwood performance, I'll be starting a cappella. No mic, no accompaniment. Just kill all sound for the first 30 seconds, then bring everything in slowly." "The director wanted it to be a surprise," she added, seeing his hesitation. "Whatever," the tech shrugged. "It's your show." Madison's new school performed just before Oakwood. Her voice was as technically perfect as ever, though Amara noticed something missing. The emotional connection that turns a good performance into a memorable one. Still, the audience responded with enthusiastic applause, and Madison left the stage with a triumphant smile. Then it was Oakwood's turn. The choir filed onto the stage, arranging themselves on the risers. Ms. Wyndham took her place at the conductor's podium, glancing nervously toward the judge's table. Amara stood alone at the front, her simple dress a contrast to Madison's elaborate costume. The auditorium lights dimmed, leaving only a single spotlight on Amara. Carlos had created a stage bare of decoration, just clean lines and subtle lighting that would shift with the music. The effect was striking in its simplicity. Ms. Wyndham raised her baton, expecting the piano introduction. But instead of music, there was silence. Complete, perfect silence. In that silence, Amara began to sing a cappella, without microphone or accompaniment. Her voice filled the auditorium with pure, raw emotion. The song, a fusion of gospel, blues, and classical that she had crafted with Diana's help, spoke of struggle and triumph, of finding light in darkness. From her position at the front of the stage, Amara could see the audience leaning forward in their seats. One of the judges, a distinguished-looking woman in the center, stood midway through the first verse, her hand over her heart. When the choir and instruments finally joined, they did so gently, supporting rather than overwhelming her voice. The lighting shifted subtly with each emotional turn of the music: warm gold for hope, deep blue for longing, brilliant white for triumph. By the final chorus, the entire auditorium was spellbound. As Amara held the last note, her voice soaring above the choir in a moment of pure transcendence, she felt something break free inside her, some final chain of doubt or fear, releasing her into the fullness of her gift. The silence that followed lasted only a heartbeat before the auditorium erupted. The standing ovation began with the judges and rippled outward until every person was on their feet, applauding, some with tears streaming down their faces. The ovation continued for minutes, refusing to die down even when Ms. Wyndham tried to signal for quiet. In the wings, Carlos was jumping up and down, pumping his fists in the air. Her father stood beside him, openly weeping with pride. As Amara finally left the stage, dazed by the response, she passed Ms. Wyndham. The choir director's face was a complex mix of emotions, reluctant admiration warring with bitter disappointment. "You changed the arrangement," she said stiffly. "I sang from my soul," Amara replied simply, then walked past her. Backstage was a flurry of congratulations and excitement. Even students from other schools sought her out to express their admiration. In the midst of the chaos, Nadine approached with a significant look. "Check your phone," she whispered. "I uploaded the video. It's already going viral." Amara pulled out her phone to find dozens of notifications. The video of Madison and Ms. Wyndham planning the sabotage had been anonymously posted online just minutes before, with the caption, "The real story behind tonight's showcase." It already had thousands of views and shares. "I thought you didn't want to win that way," Carlos said, appearing at her side. "I didn't," Amara confirmed. "But now that we've won fair and square, people should know the truth." The fallout was swift. By the time the judges announced the results, Oakwood winning Best Choir and Amara winning Best Soloist by unanimous decision, the video had spread throughout the performing arts community. The school board issued a statement promising an emergency investigation into Ms. Wyndham's conduct. Madison, upon learning of the leaked video, tried to approach the judges' table to protest, only to be informed that Westridge Academy had been disqualified for ethical violations after a parent was recorded attempting to influence the judging. As the evening wound down and people began to disperse, Amara found a quiet moment alone backstage. She was examining her trophy, a crystal star mounted on a wooden base, when she became aware of someone watching her. Ms. Wyndham stood in the shadows, her usual composure cracked. She looked older suddenly, tired in a bone-deep way. "You humiliated me," she said quietly. Amara looked at her directly. "No, you did that yourself." She paused, then added, "You tried to silence my mom, too, didn't you? When she was a student." Ms. Wyndham's face registered genuine shock. "How did you?" Carlos found her photo in an old newsletter. "Same choir, same year you were student director." Amara's voice was calm, matter of fact. "History repeats itself, I guess. Except this time, the ending's different." She turned to leave, then stopped. "You know what's sad? You could have been proud of me. You could have seen my voice as an asset, not a threat. We both could have won." Ms. Wyndham said nothing, and Amara walked away, leaving the older woman alone with her regrets. Outside, her father waited with Carlos, both beaming with pride. James wrapped her in a bear hug, lifting her off her feet. Your mama would be so proud, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. As they walked toward the parking lot, a woman approached them, tall, elegant, with a professional smile. She handed Amara a business card. Renee Washington, Juilliard School of Music. She introduced herself. That was extraordinary, Miss Tillman. I'd like to speak with you about some opportunities we offer for exceptional young vocalists. Carlos's eyes were wide as saucers. Did she just say Juilliard? He whispered loudly. The woman smiled. And you must be Carlos. The lighting design was remarkable. We have a summer program for technical theater that might interest you. As they stood, under the starlit sky, trophy in hand and future opening before them, Amara felt a sense of completion. The voice that had begun as a whisper, as an invisible melody, had finally been heard. And it was only the beginning. The Sunday after the regional showcase, Amara woke to voices downstairs. Pulling on a robe, she found her father making pancakes, while a local news crew set up in their living room. Morning, superstar, James said with a grin. They called wanting an interview with Millfield's newest celebrity. The segment aired that evening. Soul of the South, local girl's voice captures hearts. By Monday, Amara's performance had spread across social media with the hashtag Soul of the South trending regionally. As she and her father drove back into town, they were greeted by well-wishers with handmade signs. This is crazy, Amara whispered, sinking in her seat. This is just the beginning, her father replied, squeezing her hand. Your mama always said your voice would take you places. At school, the transformation was dramatic. Students who had never spoken to her now greeted her in hallways. Teachers offered congratulations. Even Principal Davis personally commended her contribution to Oakwood's reputation. That afternoon, Ms. Campbell, the guidance counselor, summoned Amara to her office. On her desk lay several official-looking envelopes. These came for you today, she said. Your performance caught some important attention. The first envelope contained an invitation to the National Youth Vocalist Finals in New York, all expenses covered, for Amara and a guardian. The second was from Berklee College of Music, expressing early interest. The third was from Lincoln Center's Young Artist Program, offering a summer workshop opportunity. These are incredible opportunities, Ms. Campbell said warmly. You've opened doors most students at Oakwood never even get to knock on. That evening, as she shared the news with her father, his eyes shone with pride. New York City, he said, whistling low. Your mother always wanted to take you there. Said the big cities were where big talents got discovered. Will you come with me? Amara asked. For the competition? Wouldn't miss it for the world, he promised. I'll talk to Jerry about time off from the factory. Carlos, meanwhile, had been invited to join the national competition team as a stage design intern. Can you believe it? He exclaimed. We're both going to New York. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind. Diana Jackson intensified their training sessions, working with Amara on breath control, stage presence, and repertoire selection. This is the big leagues, Diana explained. The judges will be looking for technical perfection and emotional authenticity. As her star rose, new pressures emerged. Her Aunt Vivian began calling regularly, offering unsolicited advice about career management and image development. She sent expensive clothes and suggested professional recording opportunities. You need someone who understands the industry, Vivian insisted. Someone who can protect your interests and guide your career path. I'm still in high school, Amara reminded her. And Dad's been managing fine so far. The pressure wasn't just coming from Vivian. Local businesses wanted performances. College recruiters hinted at scholarships. Everyone seemed to want a piece of her talent. Through it all, Amara pushed herself harder than ever, practicing for hours, studying recordings of past winners, often skipping meals to rehearse. You need to pace yourself, Diana cautioned after. Amara's voice cracked during practice. Talent shines brightest when rested. You're not a machine. Then, 3 weeks before the national competition, disaster struck. Amara arrived home to find an ambulance in their driveway. Her father had collapsed during his shift, a minor heart attack brought on by exhaustion and stress. It's nothing serious, James insisted from his hospital bed. Just a warning to slow down a bit. Amara sat beside him, guilt crushing her chest. This is because of me, isn't it? All the extra shifts you've been taking for my training, the stress from the attention. Stop right there, her father interrupted firmly. This has nothing to do with you. Doctor says it's been building for years. Poor diet, long hours, not enough rest. If anything, your success has been keeping me going. The day after her father was released, Amara received a call from Vivian. I heard about James, she said with concern. I want to help. I can advance money for medical bills. Hire someone to help while he recovers. We're managing, Amara said stiffly. Don't be proud. This is what family does. Vivian paused. With James needing rest, perhaps I could accompany you to New York? I know the city well, have contacts there. Dad's still coming with me, Amara said firmly. Be reasonable, Vivian pressed. He needs rest, not the stress of a high-pressure competition. I could help manage things, maybe set up some meetings. While we're there, meetings? What kind of meetings? Just some industry friends who'd love to hear you sing. People who could open doors for you. Vivian's voice took on an edge. This is your moment, Amara. You need to seize it before it passes. Something in her aunt's tone crystallized Amara's unease. This isn't about helping me or Dad, she realized aloud. This is about using my voice to get yourself back into the industry. Don't be ridiculous, Vivian snapped. I'm trying to help. You avoid the mistakes your mother made. Lynette had all the talent in the world, but she threw it away to settle in this backwater town. My mother didn't throw anything away, Amara said angrily. She chose love and family. She chose what mattered to her. And look where that got her. Dead at 40 with nothing to show for her gift. Amara's voice was ice when she finally spoke. Don't call again, Aunt Vivian. We don't need your kind of help. The conversation left her shaken, raising doubts she hadn't allowed herself to consider. Was she making the same choices her mother had? Was she destined for the same outcome? Talent unrecognized, dreams unfulfilled. Later that afternoon, Carlos approached her with excitement. I found something you need to see, he said. Pulling her into an empty classroom, he unfolded a yellowed paper, a photocopy of an old choir newsletter. I was digging through the archives and found this. The newsletter featured a grainy photo of Oakwood's choir from 20 years earlier. In the front row stood a young woman with Amara's eyes and smile, Lynette Reed, before she became Tillman. Look at the article, Carlos urged. Amara read aloud. The spring concert was marred by controversy when senior Lynette Reed was removed from the soloist position after deviating from the arranged music with what director Elizabeth Wyndham called inappropriate improvisation. Reed defended her performance, stating that music should come from the soul, not just the sheet. Your mom stood up for her art, just like you did, Carlos said quietly. She didn't fail, Amara. She was silenced. There's a difference. The night before leaving for New York, Amara sat on her bed, surrounded by sheet music. The pressure felt overwhelming. To perform well, to vindicate her mother, to prove her aunt wrong, to justify everyone's faith in her. Her father knocked softly on her door. Can't sleep? Amara shook her head. I'm scared, Dad. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail? James was quiet for a moment. Your mother had the same fears before every performance. Even just singing in church, she'd be up half the night worrying. Really? This was a side of her mother Amara had never heard about. Really? She used to say that fear was just the price of caring deeply. He smiled at the memory. But she also said something else I never forgot. She said, your voice isn't just talent, it's survival. It's hope. It's who you are. He took Amara's hands in his. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be authentically you. Don't sing for the judges, or the crowd, or even for me. Sing for us, for who we are, where we come from, what we believe in. As his words settled over her, Amara felt something shift inside. Fear giving way to determination, doubt to purpose. New York City rose around them like a concrete forest, buildings stretching toward the sky. Amara pressed her face to the taxi window, taking in the dizzying scale of it all. Different from Millfield, huh? Her father smiled. Just a bit. Amara laughed, feeling both terrified and exhilarated. The National Youth Vocalist Finals were being held at Lincoln Center, drawing talent from across the country. As their taxi pulled up to the hotel, Amara spotted competition banners featuring the faces of previous winners. Polished, perfect, intimidating. Carlos arrived bubbling with excitement about the professional equipment. The lighting system here makes our school auditorium look like a flashlight, he declared. And wait till you see the acoustics. Your voice is going to soar. At orientation, Amara got her first look at the competition. The other vocalists were clearly serious musicians, many from performing arts schools, others with years of professional training, all with polished confidence. Everyone looks so prepared, Amara whispered to Carlos. Yeah, and they all sound exactly the same, Carlos replied. Technical perfection, zero originality. You're the wild card here, Amara, the one no one sees coming. During her stage rehearsal, Amara felt the energy of the vast hall, her voice filling the space beautifully. From the wings, Carlos gave her a thumbs up. Her father, watching from the center of the auditorium, had tears in his eyes. That was beautiful, a voice said as Amara exited the stage. She turned to find a tall young woman with close-cropped hair. I'm Zoe from Chicago Arts Academy. Your voice is different. In a good way. Thanks, Amara replied, surprised by the friendly overture. Everyone's talking about the viral sensation from the South. Some people are betting you'll take the whole thing, Zoe confided. Half these kids are terrified of you. You're the unknown factor that could upset the expected order. The preliminary rounds began the next morning, when Amara performed a stripped-down version of Bridge Over Troubled Water, reimagined with gospel influences. The judges watched with inscrutable expressions. That evening, her name appeared on the list of 10 finalists who would compete for the championship. The night before finals, Amara stood alone on the hotel balcony, looking out over the glittering city. So much had changed in just a few months, from the shy girl who hid her voice to a national finalist. She touched her mother's bracelet, the small music note charm cool against her skin. I'm not afraid anymore, she whispered. The morning of the finals dawned bright. The performance hall buzzed with anticipation. Family members, industry representatives, press, and talent scouts all gathering. As the closing performer, Amara would have the longest wait, but also the greatest opportunity to leave a lasting impression. Backstage, as her performance time approached, Amara found a quiet corner away from the chaos. She closed her eyes, centering herself. The noise faded away, leaving only the steady rhythm of her heart and the certainty of what she needed to do. You okay? Carlos appeared at her side. You're on in 5 minutes. Amara nodded, a strange calm settling over her. I'm ready. Remember, Carlos said, squeezing her hand. Just sing your truth. The rest will take care of itself. As she waited, in the wings, Amara touched her mother's bracelet one last time. I'm not afraid anymore, she repeated softly. The announcer's voice rang out. Our final performer, from Millfield, Georgia, Amara Tillman. Unlike the other contestants who had used full orchestral accompaniment, Amara had chosen to begin a cappella. The song was a lullaby her mother had written, half spiritual, half folk song, with lyrics about finding light in darkness and strength in vulnerability. The first notes hung in the air, pure and unadorned. The audience, expecting a traditional competition piece, sat up straighter, intrigued by this departure. By the second verse, gentle instrumental accompaniment began to filter in, subtle, supportive, never overwhelming her voice as she sang. Amara felt herself stepping fully into her power, not just technical skill, but the ability to make others feel, to touch hearts, to speak truths through music. The fear that had plagued her fell away completely, replaced by the pure joy of connection. Midway through, she glanced out to find many people openly crying. Even some judges were visibly moved, one wiping away tears as she made notes. The Juilliard representative was nodding slowly, a look of profound appreciation on her face. For the final verse, Amara closed her eyes, pouring everything she had into the climactic notes. All her journey, her mother's memory, her father's sacrifice, the small town that had first rejected then embraced her gift. Her voice soared through the hall with crystalline clarity and raw emotion. When she finished, there was a moment of complete silence, that magical pause when an audience is so moved they forget to respond. Then, like a wave breaking, the applause began. People rose to their feet, cheering, some still wiping away tears. The standing ovation continued for minutes, refusing to die down. From the stage, Amara could see her father standing, tears streaming down his face. Carlos was jumping up and down in the lighting booth, punching the air. Diana Jackson stood with her hands pressed to her heart, nodding with deep satisfaction. Backstage, the other contestants greeted her with genuine admiration. That wasn't just singing, Zoe told her, embracing her spontaneously. That was art. The judges deliberated for nearly an hour, an unusually long time for the competition. When they finally returned, the head judge approached the microphone. In my 20 years with this competition, I have rarely been as moved as I was today, she began. Every finalist demonstrated extraordinary talent, but one performer reminded us all why music exists in the first place: to connect, to heal, to express what cannot be said in mere words. She opened the envelope, though her smile made the result clear. The winner of this year's National Youth Vocalist Competition is Amara Tillman from Millfield, Georgia. The audience erupted again. Amara accepted the crystal trophy and scholarship envelope in a daze as cameras flashed. In that blinding light, she felt simultaneously very small and infinitely powerful, a girl from a small town whose voice had finally been heard. Later that evening, after interviews and congratulations, Amara found a quiet moment alone with her father in the hotel room. He sat beside her on the edge of the bed, looking at the trophy now sitting on the dresser. "Your mother used to sing that lullaby to you every night," he said softly. "She wrote it when you were just a baby. Said it came to her in a dream." Amara leaned against his shoulder, exhausted but content. "I felt her with me today, Dad. Like she was singing right alongside me." "She was," he replied simply. "She always has been." The next morning, as they prepared to return home, Amara received calls from 3 major conservatories offering scholarships, 2 record labels interested in development deals, and an invitation to perform at a prestigious summer concert series. Back in Millfield, news of Amara's national win had already transformed the town. The school board had officially terminated Ms. Wyndham following the investigation. The annual Soloist Award had been renamed in Amara's honor. Her father returned to a promotion at the factory, manager of his department, with better hours and benefits. That evening, in the quiet of their home, Amara placed her trophy beside her mother's photograph on the mantel. "We did it, Mama," she whispered, touching the silver charm bracelet on her wrist. "We did it together." Outside, the soft southern twilight settled over Millfield. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new songs to sing. But, for now, Amara simply stood in the moment, no longer afraid, no longer unseen. Her voice finally, and forever her OWAS. Her father watched from the doorway. Amara began to hum softly, a new melody taking shape. The first notes of whatever came next. Have you ever wondered how many extraordinary voices remain unheard simply because the world isn't ready to listen? If Amara's journey moved you, hit like, subscribe, and share to help other silenced talents find their spotlight.